Welcome back to HR Stew. My name is Holly Nels.
And I'm Regina Direly.
And this is HR Stew. Episode 7. Are layoffs the worst?
One of the most difficult situations in HR is having to let employees go. So that makes layoffs among the most challenging tasks emotionally, socially, and often physically. While the stress of those losing their job is far greater, the stress endured when having to execute numerous layoffs can take a massive toll. That brings us to the topic of discussion. Have either of you been laid off? What's your experience? What's your takeaways from being laid off?
I have never been laid off. My husband is in the union, the IBEW, so he's been laid off numerous times. It's part of the process and what we had to go through. He was laid off during the recession and when I was pregnant with our second child, and that takes a toll on your mental well-being, your marriage, your, you name it. It took a toll on our family, but we made it. He went to Afghanistan to work as a contractor for a year after that and was gone, about a year. But he was laid off for, if I remember correctly, I want to say it was like 14 months and then many other times after that. And I think he was even laid off when we had our first child too. It was just a pattern. I have a child and he gets laid off. So thank God Thank God I only had 2.
Well, you're lucky because in HR, if you're not revenue producing, you're always on the chopping block when layoffs are coming. So I actually have been a part of 3 layoffs. And the worst thing about being in HR is that they make you lay people off and then they lay you off, right? So you do all the dirty work and then, you get laid off, right? But I do have one story that it was my first ever layoff, and it was in the early 2000s recession after September 11th. And I worked for, we'll call it an HR software company. They did a lot of different things, but it was an interesting environment. It was one of the jobs that as soon as I started, I knew I had made a mistake. I had taken a pay cut after September 11th and did all sorts of things to assist, with the organization other than just HR. And one day I'm at my desk and just working. And I get called from the conference room, Regina! So I walk into the conference room and it's hard not to give an image, but typical Italian New Yorker CEO. And he goes, "Your number's up, kid." And that's how I found out I was getting laid off.
So by called, you mean he yelled at you?
He yelled my name from the conference room, and I walked in. I wasn't even sitting down yet. And he said, "Your number's up, kid." And not a lot more information other than that. It was definitely shell-shocking, that was a different thing. Like, we were a smaller company. There was maybe 30-ish employees. I'm supporting a lot of employees. But yeah, I just remember because I worked in the city. I had relocated back to Long Island because I'd taken a big pay cut, right? So I could no longer afford my New York City apartment. And I just remember being on the train. I still remember being on the train and just the fear, I wasn't even angry at that point, right? I mean, even how he laid me off, it didn't matter at that time, right? Later on, I was angry at how he did it, But at that time, just the hard sinking feeling. At that time, I knew a lot of people that were out of work and just what's going to happen. What am I going to do? Is this going to impact my career? Is it salvageable? All these things. And, and none of that came to pass. I survived. And then, I was part of 2 other layoffs too. Luckily, that hasn't been the case for many, many years. Yeah, it's not fun. And you had said it's not fun being in HR and having to lay people off. And I will say, I will never go into a termination looking forward to it. I always have a sense of dread, even when you've done all the right things and the person has warnings and all that. Layoffs are terrible.
They're the worst.
Because typically, the person didn't do anything wrong. And sometimes you don't agree with the decisions of who's being selected to even be laid off. And sometimes it isn't fair. Like life. It's just not fair. You're like, why is this person being laid off when they do this, and this? Layoffs are just something I hope I never have to go through again in my career, either executing them or being on the other end of it. I hope.
I know March of 2020, when the world shut down because of COVID, I probably helped facilitate, I would say, 80 to 90 layoffs and furloughs. And I remember just the emotional toll. And I understand it takes a huge emotional toll on your family. But just the emotional toll to go from building to building, business to business. And it was a day of layoffs. I remember calling my father afterwards, and my father's been laid off too. And I remember calling my father afterwards just for him to listen to me. And I said, this is what I've had to do, and I have to do more tomorrow. And he said to me, like, you have to treat them with respect and dignity and let them walk out of there, with their respect and dignity intact. I don't know why that stuck with me so much. And that should be something we all do with any termination, treat somebody with respect and dignity. But just for him to say it in that moment, I hope that I facilitated all of those layoffs with respect and dignity, because I know how hard it is on families when you have to go home and say, I lost my job today and the world is closing down and I don't know what's going to happen to me next.
Yeah, it was a terrible time, but it was so comforting that you were able to have that conversation. Like, look, file for unemployment today. You're going to get this, you're going to get that. Like, it just helped. Other times that doesn't exist.
Right.
Like you're just getting a fraction of your salary.
Yeah.
And no benefits on top of it. Trying
They'll offer you Cobra for $800 a
right.
month
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you don't have a family plan.
Yeah.
So layoffs are no fun. And now we're living in a time where, when we're on LinkedIn or whatever, we're seeing all sorts of people, all sorts of careers, especially the tech industry, being drastically impacted. And then the Twitter thing, that's been kind of crazy. Even some of the, on TikTok, the fake layoffs that they've had on there. They had a guy who said that he was terminated by HR with memes, and people believed it. And I was like, what the? I really was horrified, Everybody was freaking out, you need to call a lawyer, you need to do this. And it was funny because it was so ridiculous that it could be true.
Right.
Right, because of the ridiculous things that are happening right now.
When you think about conducting layoffs, are you one of those that wants to maintain the relationship, or Irish goodbye, you're locked out, you're done in 24 hours type of person?
Look, I think especially a layoff, right? This is someone that's contributed typically to your organization. Now, a lot of times lower performers will be selected. Typically, this is someone that there's no reason why they're being let go. So I think you definitely keep the door open. I think if you're doing a layoff and you're coordinated, you're doing a lot to try to assist them. You're coordinating with outplacement services, or you're at least getting managers in alignment to help with resume reviews or whatever. If you're laying staff off, knowing that you're in a financial position that is undesirable, or maybe you're in a state of emergency, you still have to spend the time to do that correctly. There are steps that you need to take, to help employees. They shouldn't just walk out the door and you never talk to them again when you're laying them off. I don't believe. There's coordination of benefits. There's all sorts of things that need to happen. And they need to digest what happened. They're not going to ask all the questions that they want to ask when they're blindsided with a layoff. They're going to go home. Their spouse is going to start asking questions or whatever, and then they're going to have to circle back with you. So you want to keep the door open. Listen, after you process this, please give me a call. Any questions you have. I just think it's human decency, but it's also just good business sense to do that.
Agreed. You want to keep those open lines of communication so you can maintain, when you do call them back, maintain that culture so they're not resentful. I don't know if any of your companies who laid you off would want you to come back in and go to work. Would you be willing to do so? If one of the companies that laid you off said, hey.
Are you asking me personally?
I'm asking you personally, yeah.
I'm a 0 no. 0% no. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. But, so back in the day, there was a website. I don't think it exists anymore. I haven't thought about this in a long time. But so when everybody was getting laid off from all the .coms and all the stuff, there was a website. It was called Effed Company, we'll say. And everybody would go on there and put all the dirt. All the dirt would be on there. Specific, you call it names. It was all anonymous. You couldn't trace who was putting it, right? So, and nowadays there's more,
yeah.
Right? I think how you conduct that, look at the PR nightmare that, not to name them again, but Twitter is facing right now.
Right.
When I said it's good business sense, it's good business sense. I mean, how you part with somebody or how you depart with somebody could either make them furious or dang, that stinks that the company was in this position, but at least there's a good way and a bad way to do almost anything, and you'll pay one way or another.
Well,
if
and
you don't do
now
it right.
when you're applying for jobs on Indeed or any, website, it gives you the reviews for the company. So
Right.
if you lay somebody off and they're disgruntled and they go put a bad review, as a person who would apply for a job, I would hope that you go read those reviews and see if that's the culture that you want to put yourself in too.
I always look at the reviews.
Me too.
And then you have to keep in mind that most people that are leaving reviews are leaving bad reviews.
Agreed.
However, some of the stuff they're saying is legitimate. Like there's
Right.
nuggets in there of
Yeah.
information that you want to read.
Yeah.
What is the hardest experience you've had conducting a layoff?
There are so many. One that really sticks out in my mind is it was a gentleman, he had a family, and he was also in the construction business. And I had worked really closely with him in my role as their HR business partner. And, just got to know him, got to know about on a personal level with him and his family. And so when I conducted that layoff, I felt empathy for him because I know, now he had to go home and tell his wife. And I've been in those shoes so many times of my husband calling me and saying, hey, I've been laid off and I have to go down to the hall and sign the books. And I'm just thinking, crap, what are we going to do? How are we going to afford to pay for groceries, pay for baby formula, pay for diapers, whatever the case may be. And I had such empathy for him because I've been in that predicament. All of them are awful. And like I said, with COVID and going through the 6 to 8 different locations that I had to go to, laying off 10 to 15 different people at each location, I can't tell you how many times I thought in my head, I've been in your shoes. I understand where you're coming from. And I am just here to do my job and hopefully, make the company to where they're financially stable on the other end of this.
My example is from that same company that I talked about earlier. So over 20 years ago, and I still think about it. This gentleman was hired prior to my start date, and he worked there for a very brief period of time. And then I got called into the CEO's office, and he said, we're going to eliminate that position. And what happened is that this gentleman that they used to work with became available, right? So they're like, he's not working out. We're just going to eliminate the position. And I knew that he had left a very good job to come there. And the economy wasn't awesome at the time. We weren't in a full-fledged recession at that time, but things were weird. Like the .com thing was busting a little bit. Like it was just an odd time. Jobs weren't extremely plentiful at that time. I couldn't talk them out of it, and I had to do it, and neither of them wanted to be in the room. And mind you, I'd had maybe one brief conversation with this gentleman prior. So I go in to lay him off, and when I tell you that he was so upset, he was sobbing.
Oh, wow.
He was so devastated because he had left this other really good job, at a major bank, by the way, in New York, to take this job because it was supposed to be this great opportunity. He was going to build the software and this team, and they sold him a whole bill of goods, and then they just ripped it out from underneath him. And I still think about him to this day. I hope that he was able to go back to the bank. I don't know what happened to him after that, but I've thought about that experience, and I told you earlier, I knew I made a mistake pretty early on when I was working there, and just that type of carelessness about someone else's career is just so despicable.
Yeah.
That was my worst experience. I felt terrible having to do it. I had no power to change it. I had to deliver the message. He was not mad at me. He was not anything. He just was truly devastated at his circumstances, and I felt really terrible.
Well, and I know we've talked about this on previous podcasts too, is we can argue as the HR person why, we shouldn't go this route or why we shouldn't eliminate a position, why we shouldn't lay off. We can argue until we're blue in the face, but ultimately, once the CEO's made that decision,
or whoever,
it's their decision to make. And I really feel like to not be in the layoff meeting with you was not the right route to go.
They didn't care.
Yeah,
so,
obviously.
Yeah, that's, he wasn't worth their time.
Yeah.
Hopefully I never have the opportunity to work for, I shouldn't say opportunity, what's a better word? The unfortunate of working for a company like that, right? And again, that was over 20 years ago, and I still, to this day, think about it. Still to this day, I still get slightly nauseous if I have to carry out acts like that, and I'm okay with it. I'm glad that I feel that way.
Yeah.
This part of the podcast, we go to the online forum called Ask HR, where users can go on and ask questions and get answers from HR professionals. This user, I Have Many Cats 66, has asked, and the title is, Employer accidentally sent me a term letter. I received a document to sign over email informing me that my position was ending due to financial reasons. I signed it. I spent 24 hours assuming today would be my last day. I started to offboard myself on our self-service website, and I spent my evening incredibly stressed trying to plan for the future. It occurred to me that it was odd that no one had talked to me about it otherwise, so I asked to confirm that it was the case. This morning, I learned it was a mistake. Obviously, I'm thankful I'm still employed, but is there anything I should do about this? Is it worth making a fuss about? What could they even do to rectify this? Do I have any grounds to ask for anything?
I have more questions than this. It depends. I would just be curious. Did the termination letter say you'll be termed tomorrow? Tomorrow's your last day? I mean, how was this termination letter?
My question is, why would he not have reached out to his manager?
Like right away, saying, do you need me to clear my desk right now? When is my final paycheck coming? I don't.
I really hope that this company doesn't, that letter was after a conversation, right? Like he just received the letter, so we don't know what else happened, but whoever was supposed to get that letter, which, was it a Dear John letter? Did it not have the employee's name on it? Like this, you're right, there's so many questions still.
And if he did receive a letter and it didn't have his name on it, why would he even assume it was him? If I received a letter saying your position's going to be eliminated, I wouldn't assume that it was me. I would come straight to my manager and say, hey, I got this. What's going on? And have a conversation.
I don't think that I would assume it. I don't think I would have made an assumption it wasn't for me, right? But I immediately would have went to my manager or supervisor and been like, so I just received this. Is there anything that you want me to wrap up before I'm out the door? Peace out. Like whatever. Wow. I mean, what a horrifying experience, right? Just to get a termination letter and no conversation. Just starts offboarding himself. If only all employees could be that.
I'm going to complete my exit interview now. And to rectify it, I don't know that I think he really needs to go and have a conversation with his manager to rectify it, to figure out what was going on, why was this said, do I have, job performance issues that I need to work on, really be proactive.
I'd get some stuff in writing.
I know.
I send out an email. I wouldn't even be having a conversation.
But I mean, he needs to ask, why was this sent to me? Why was this directed to me? Are you guys looking at layoffs? Are you guys looking at termination?
Well, clearly they are.
And was I one of them thought about, like, what can I do to keep my job? Or if you're not pleased there, start looking for another job.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as cautiously as you can, maybe that was a sign,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd start looking for a job, even if it's not aggressive.
Yeah.
I definitely would put some feelers out and start looking on Indeed and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
For sure.
But don't approach them in an irate manner.
No, keep your job.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to find a job when you have a job.
Agreed.
Right? So he dodged a bullet, if you want to call it that. And now it's time to regroup. Definitely make people feel a little uncomfortable that happened to you. So they feel like they owe you something, maybe.
Maybe they'll keep them on.
Talk about the stress that you had, because that was legitimate.
Yeah.
But wow, yeah, what a mess up that is.
I don't know if I go back to work.
Somebody's head should be rolling for that.
Right.
Like for sending the email, a termination email that apparently didn't have anybody's names on it to the wrong person and then didn't even realize that you did it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, mistakes happen. Maybe you typed in H-O and Howard came up instead of Holly.
Right.
Right? Like stuff like that happens.
Right.
However, to not realize it after the fact.
And to just send somebody a termination letter to sign without no context, no conversation, that's not.
Well, who got that letter back that they didn't follow up with him if he wasn't supposed to be terminated? There's so many things wrong here.
Right. I know I have received a couple of phone calls or emails of, hey, I want to start going through the process of maybe disciplinary actions or performance improvement plans, whatever the case may be. I received a phone call from a gentleman who was in a state of panic because he had written out this document to why his employee wasn't performing adequately, why his employee, like everything his employee was doing wrong, just so I could review it, I could go over it, we could come up with a plan in place. And he wasn't ready to have a conversation with this employee. And he calls me in a state of panic. I sent it to the employee. So he accidentally sent the email to the employee, no context, no nothing, but he sent it to his employee on accident, and it forced his hand and forced him to have that conversation.
That's going to bring our episode to a close. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of HR Stew. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have any stories about layoffs or questions you'd like to share, message us on Instagram at hr.stew. I'm Regina.
And I'm Holly.
And we'll see you next time on HR Stew.